All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about elasticity of supply. So what is that? So it is the degree to which price changes affect quantity supplied. Or in other words, how much will suppliers change the quantity supplied in response to price changes? So is a large price change going to cause a small change in quantity supplied, or is a large price change going to cause a large change in quantity supplied? And what you're going to do here is that you're going to write the bolded blue terms and definitions on the blank spaces on page 8 of your packet. So you'll notice there are no pre-written terms for you there, so you're going to write them yourself. So for example, for this slide, you would write down elasticity of supply as the term on the left, and then the definition, degree to which price changes affect quantity supplied, on the right. All right, so what makes supply inelastic, and what is that? So if supply is inelastic, that means that changes in a good's price have little impact on quantity supplied. So if the price rises a lot, suppliers are not going to change the quantity supplied all that much. And again, write this down: inelastic supply on the left, definition on the right. All right, what are some examples of inelastic supply and what makes them that way? So fine art is an example. And the reason why that is, so if the price of fine art rises substantially, suppliers cannot increase quantity supplied that fast. And that's because fine art takes a long time to produce. Artists need to sit down and work on that, right? So suppliers cannot quickly increase quantity supplied in response to price changes. So make sure you have this down as an example of inelastic supply. Another example is movie tickets. And the reason why this is that there are only so many seats in a theater. So if the price of movie tickets rises substantially, what that means is suppliers can't dramatically increase quantity supplied because, well, there are just only so many seats in a theater. If you sell 200 tickets and that's the maximum quantity of seats in your theater, price rises, you can't increase to 250 unless you want to add more seats. And again, make sure you write these examples down. All right, let's talk about elastic supply. So what this means is that a small change in a good's price has a large change in the quantity supplied. And again, write this down: elastic supply on the left, definition on the right. All right, so let's talk about some examples. So a really good one is sports memorabilia. So suppose your team wins, right? Well, making sports memorabilia like jerseys or posters or t-shirts, any kind of souvenir like that, they're pretty easy to produce, right? They're mass produced. You can produce them quickly and cheaply. So if the team wins, then the suppliers can very quickly increase production of sports memorabilia in response to that price increase. All right, so just as demand elasticity has determinants, so things that make demand more or less elastic, so too are there determinants of supply elasticity. So go ahead, you're going to write this on the left, and then let's write those determinants on the right-hand side of your paper. So time period is 1, number of producers, length of production period, ease of storing stocks, availability of spare production capacity, and availability of resources. So again, make sure you write these down. All right, let's look at them one by one. So again, time period, you're going to write this down. And what does that mean? So as with demand, in the long run, the supply of goods and services tends to become more elastic. And this is because over time, firms can invest in more equipment and more firms enter the industry. So something you might be familiar with if you're following production of the coronavirus vaccine. Right now, there are only a few suppliers who are close to being able to produce a vaccine that will go on the market. So I think there's maybe 1 or 2 that's ahead right now. Well, initially, right, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to produce all of the supply that they need since there are so few firms on the market. But over time, as more trials are completed and there are more varieties of vaccine for people to take, supply will become more elastic. All right, next one is number of producers. So the more producers there are, the easier it should be for the industry to increase output in response to a price increase. Supply will therefore be more elastic. So for example, there are many different gasoline providers on the market. So if there's a change in the price of gasoline, they can easily increase production. However, there are only a few manufacturers who manufacture diamond jewelry. So they cannot increase supply as readily in response to changes in price. And again, make sure you write this down. All right, next one is length of production period. So supply is more likely to be elastic if the production period of a good or service is short and a firm can quickly increase production of a good or service. So this is similar to that sports memorabilia example we saw earlier, right? So it's very easy to increase production of sports memorabilia because the production period is short. It's easy to produce a t-shirt. You can do that in a factory, right? So another example, cookies, right? Cookies do not take very long to make. So if the price of cookies rises, the bakery can easily increase production of those cookies. Now, on the other hand, right, building something huge like this enormous jet engine thing, whatever that is, over on the right, that takes a long time to make and involves a lot of skilled workers. So that's going to be, or if the price rises of that, it's going to take a much longer time to increase supply in response to that price change. All right, and the next is ease of storing stocks. So how easy is it to store things that you've already made? So supply is more likely to be elastic if it is easy for firms to stock goods and store them for long periods of time. I did not make this blue, but do write this down as well. Supply is more likely to be inelastic if this is not the case, right? So the reason why this happens, right, is that, so suppose that you are making barbells. Those are easy to store. They don't go bad. So you can store those for a long period of time and increase the quantity supplied of them if the price changes. Now, on the other hand, for something like lettuce or other perishable goods, right, they don't store very long. You can't keep them around that much. So if the price changes, you can't increase quantity supplied by all that much because it will go bad if you're sitting on too much stock. Next up is production capacity. So the more production capacity there is in the industry, the easier it should be to increase output if price goes up. This makes supply more elastic. And supply is more likely to be inelastic if this is not the case. So you might be wondering, well, what is production capacity? So production capacity is just, well, how many resources does the firm have to produce goods, right? So for example, a factory on the left right there that's manufacturing garments, they're huge, right? They have many, many workers. They're able to increase production really rapidly if there's a change in price. Now, this guy on the left who is running his own lawnmower business, he doesn't have the resources at his disposal that a large factory would have, right? So there's only one of him. He doesn't have a bunch of machines. He's just got one little small handheld lawnmower. So he cannot increase his supply or his quantity supplied of lawnmower services very rapidly in response to changes in price, since it's just him. All right. Next up is availability of resources. So supply is more likely to be elastic if the good can be produced using a few easily available resources. Supply is more likely to be inelastic if this is not the case. So let's consider human resources, right? So on the left, this mining company can hire relatively unskilled workers, right? So people who go to work there don't need a lot of training. They don't have a lot of special skills, right? So if you need to increase production, you need a lot more miners, you can go and easily hire those people. Now, on the other hand, right, people who are skilled pop singers on the right, that's a career you have to train for a really long time. You need to have a certain degree of natural talent. So if you're a music recording company and you want to increase the supply of the music or quantity supplied of the music that you're selling, it's going to be a little bit harder to do that quickly since you need to spend more time training and hiring singers. All right, make sure you have the terms written down, and that is it for today.